can fast twitch muscle be built from weight room training? Slow twitch fibers are extraordinarily resistant to fatigue. Okay, they can just go and go and go. Fast twitch fibers use a lot of energy in a very short period of time. They can express a very, very high velocity or a very high impulse. They can put out a large amount of force, but they are not fatigue resistant. Here we go. I think when we're initially discussing something like fast twitch muscle fibers, I actually think it's really, really important to talk about what aren't fast twitch muscle fibers, because oftentimes I think we sort of get confused. I think it's important too to think about the like physiological aspect around fast twitch fibers, what happens, and all those things. So we're going to go into how to train fast twitch muscle fibers. What is the difference between fast twitch muscle fibers and their, their alter ego slow twitch muscle fibers? We're going to go into talking about some of the aspects around it with the physiology. Then we're going to talk about the sports stuff. Then we're going to get into an even deeper discussion around like actually applying this information and like what does it mean to sports performance and sports development. But before we get into all this stuff, we have a couple huge announcements. The first thing, okay, right off the bat, we are going to be moving our podcast to the main channel, to the Garage Strength main channel, and it's going to be streamed every single Tuesday. So if we have a guest or if it's Earl and I talking, that will be streamed on Tuesdays, and it will be on the Garage Strength main channel. Our Garage Strength podcast channel subsequently is turning into Garage Strength clips. So we're going to pull out 2 to 3 clips from each podcast, and we're going to have that there. So it's going to be a little bit shorter on the clips. You can go in and watch like a 10 to 15 minute clip. There's actually one today where we talk about a couple factors. I think the one that we released, so at least the one we released the other day, was around like how to make a plyometric sequence for someone who's struggling with something. So we're trying to give you guys a whole bunch of different facets. There's one other huge issue or a huge thing that I'm going to talk about, and it's a guest that is going to be on our podcast this coming Tuesday. A very, very large, or maybe not large in the sense as a human being, but a very popular individual. I sort of want everybody to flood the comments to see who it is. We're going to talk about slow twitch, fast twitch. We're going to break all that stuff down. We're going to get into some of the research, and then I'm going to release who that is. So let's get into some of this. If we're looking at some of the differences between slow twitch and fast twitch, we've initially got to understand type 2A, type 2B, type 2, or type 1, type 2A, type 2X, okay? All of these, type 1 is going to be slow twitch. And if we just think about a slow twitch muscle fiber is going to be essentially resistant to a point to fatigue, okay? As long as your liver is rolling and you're handling things really, really well for a long period of exercise or a long period of a physical bout, as long as your liver is dealing with everything well and you're not bonking, because that's essentially what bonking is from, is when your liver essentially can't handle providing enough energy to your body. As long as your liver is flowing fine, your slow twitch fibers are extraordinarily resistant to fatigue. Okay, they can just go and go and go. Now, the big thing there is that they are very, very effective at utilizing fat, so fat oxidation, and they're going to have a bit more, if I remember correctly, they're going to have more mitochondria even than the fast twitch muscle fibers. Now, when we think about this, okay, they use less energy than our fast twitch muscle fibers, okay? So if I'm doing something, and the other thing is that if we think about, like Henneman's size principle and recruitment, if we're doing things like moving this pen, right? I don't need a massive amount of force, so I'm going to be using slower twitch muscles that I can use consistently. It's nothing super, super precise. It's something that I can do for a long period of time. This is going to be an example of utilizing those slow twitch fibers. Okay. Now, if I would bend this pen in half very quickly and apply a massive amount of force, that would be an execution or a contraction of a fast twitch fiber. Okay. Now, I like to think about personally, the way I think about fibers, fast twitch, slow twitch, is, and this is a sort of a weird analogy, but I think in the lens of BTUs, okay, or British thermal units, and this is a weird thing. So you guys got to bear with me on this one. I heat my house with firewood, okay? So if I use firewood, like, let's say poplar, okay, or let's just roll with poplar, okay? Poplar, I'm going to throw it in the wood stove. There's not a lot of British thermal units, not a lot of BTUs. It's going to burn really, really fast. It'll be really hot for like 20 to 30 minutes. It'll put off a ton of heat, and then it's done. It's extinguished, okay? It's done. Like the whole log burns quickly. I think about fast twitch fibers in that light, okay? Burned really, really quickly, gives a lot of heat in a short period of time, and then it's done, okay? Now, if I have its counterpart, okay, so think about poplar. Even though I don't really like poplar and I really like fast twitch muscles, fast twitch fibers, I think about the comparison there as poplar's fast twitch. Now, if you use something like locust or pin oak or ash, green ash typically, this is where you're going to see wood, okay? So if I use locust to heat my house, it'll burn all night. It'll burn for 10 to 12 hours. And when you wake up in the morning, even the ashes will be so compact that it'll still be in that log formation. I think about logs like locust logs and pin oak and ash in the light of slow twitch. Okay. They burn for a very, very long period of time. So if we can think about like what is not fast twitch fibers, in this case, they use a lot of energy. Okay, let's think about that. Fast twitch fibers use a lot of energy in a very short period of time. Okay, they can express a very, very high velocity or a very high impulse. Okay, they can put out a large amount of force, but they are not energy resistant, or they're not fatigue resistant. They fatigue very, very quickly. Okay, I actually was thinking about, I could essentially hold this pen all day, right? But if I sort of like broke this pen in half 20, 30 times, my thumb, whatever explosive movement I'm doing with this pen, I know that's a weird comparison, it would fatigue pretty quickly. So we have to think about fast twitch fibers in that light. Okay, we have to think about slow twitch fibers in that light. Then we have to think about the metabolic expense behind that. And even to the point, it's like, okay, so what makes a fast twitch fiber able to express more force versus a slow twitch fiber not able to express as much force? And I think that comes into, there's a lot of research, and actually I did have some research up on my phone, but there's a lot of research around cross-sectional areas. Okay, so if we can think about, we have a myosin head, and we actually just talked about this in our YouTube video that came out on Monday. Our YouTube video that came out on Monday, we talked about athletic muscle, and we talked about how if we have more actin or if we have more myosin heads, okay, in turn we'll be able to link to more actin heads, and then in turn we will have more coordinated muscle because we will have a higher force. So for every myosin head, there's 6 actin heads, and essentially the myosin head is mining to link to these heads of the actin heads, and in turn express a large amount of force. But that act of linking to those heads, that space, that action is the cross-sectional areas. Okay, so the more cross-sectional area that you have, or the more cross-sectional areas that a muscle grouping has, the more strength and the more force that muscle can typically put out. And then there's even deeper comprehension here or relationship between pennation angles and cross-sectional areas. Okay, so that's where those fast twitch muscle fibers come into play. Now, I'm trying to give you like the absolute dumbest down version of the difference between slow twitch and fast twitch, and then why fast twitch fibers are able to put out more force than slow twitch. And now think about too is that a good example on the easiest thought process here would be if I would go run, I could run, let's say, at 80% speed. So let's say I run, I don't know, let's say I'm running in an hour, I could run 6 or 7 miles. So let's say I run 7 miles in an hour, right? 6.5, 7 miles in an hour. That's actually about what I'm running right now. If I would run at my top speed, which could be 17 to 18 miles an hour, I don't know exactly, but let's just say that's around where I'm running, I would only be able to handle that 17 to 18 miles per hour for 20 yards maximum, probably, maybe 30 yards. But I would be running at a much faster clip. So I'm using a lot of energy to run 17 to 18 miles per hour, and then I'm going to be fatigued very quickly. Okay. Whereas if I would go out and run at 7 miles per hour, I could basically do that for 3 to 4 hours straight. Okay. So that's a really good analysis of what's happening. Now, the other reason here is that I would be using more muscle fiber, okay, to run faster. Okay. I would be using more energy to run faster. And then that's where we start to look at things like cross-sectional areas. So then we're looking at like our glutes. There's more cross-sectional areas. Therefore, they're stronger. They're more explosive. They can apply more force. They have a greater rate of force development. And then in turn, they're fast twitch. Okay. So that's sort of like an easy way to go about it. Then there's a couple questions. Is it possible to fiber shift as an athlete? Okay. This is going to happen to a point based around what you're doing in your training or in your sport or whatever it is that you're doing on a regular basis. So it is feasible to shift fibers. Now, if you're looking at like type 2X, you're typically not going to see like a type 2X fiber shift, but type 1 to a type 2 A, you might, or type 2B, you might see the fiber shifting happen. And we're actually going to go into a paper here around fiber shifting shortly. Okay, so we will discuss that a little bit. Now, can fast twitch muscle be built from weight room training? Okay, and I think one of the big factors to come into play here is that a lot of people will consider that a lot of individuals will say, well, here's a good one. Even though there's peer-reviewed papers that will show you that untrained athletes can get a better vertical jump from cleaning or from snatching and from sprinting, and that back squatting helps athletes sprint or squat or sprint or jump higher, whatever, they will say that it's all causation. Okay, so this goes back to this question. Can fast twitch muscle be built from weight room training? Okay, people still believe using high-speed movements doesn't cause fiber shifting. People still believe that weight room training, if someone does weight room training, it's just going to be causation. The reason why someone is explosive or the reason why someone runs fast is all causation. There's nothing else. It's just causation. It just so happens that they do that type of training. That is to a point accurate, that some people just have that makeup and they just happen to be good at weightlifting, so therefore they're weightlifters. And it is there isn't causation there. Actually, I think I was just screwing that up. But anyway, if we get into this, can you build fast twitch muscle fiber in the weight room? Yes, you certainly can. You can, if you spend a lot of time doing heavy resistance training, if you spend a lot of time doing explosive resistance work or doing explosive plyometrics or doing sprinting or things like that, then in turn, over a long period of time, you will indeed see a fiber shift away from type 1 into more type 2 and back and forth, okay, depending upon what you're doing. So we've got to realize that is feasible. We also have to understand that if we can make a muscle bigger, the muscle will produce more force, okay? The muscle will be stronger. So if we can get a muscle stronger, if we can get bigger, if we can get more hypertrophy of a muscle fiber, in turn, that muscle will become more fast twitch if we continuously do high speed movements and we do high impulse based movements to make sure that the myosin and the actin links are occurring as we're increasing the size of that specific muscle. So what exercises positively impact fast twitch muscle? Okay, this is going to be like the ultimate, debate. This goes back to on our Peak Strength channel, we broke down the weightlifting study, and the weightlifting study response is always, you'll have the weightlifting zealots, partially me to a point, not entirely, but partially me, will say weightlifting movements help people get faster. Then you'll have the guys, the zealots who are anti-weightlifting because they always sucked at cleaning or snatching, and they just feel bad that they could never do that, so they tell people not to do that. So those people will say, well, it just so happens that person's explosive. That's why they're doing that exercise, because they're good at that exercise. So I think it's important that there's a bigger gray area there, especially with trained athletes. But I think it's going to come back to understanding different twitch forces. I think there's some neurological stuff that we have to comprehend outside of the muscle physiology. I think we also have to recognize that if we're moving things at higher speeds, that's going to help us. If we're moving heavier loads, that's going to help with motor unit recruitment. Okay, with the size principle. If we think through the lens of moving through full range of motion, okay, that's also going to do some communication. That's going to force some communication to your body to recruit more. Okay, so if you lengthen a muscle, your body is going to try and protect and deal with that mechanical tension. So if we have longer periods of mechanical tension, we can get something stronger. If we have long and fast periods of mechanical tension and load, that in turn will force our body to make an adaptation to protect itself from those violent movements. Okay, so that's where a clean, or that's where a snatch, or that's where, a pad bench or a plyometric movement comes into play, is that all of this stuff comes back to adaptations. We're trying to get adaptations, and the adaptations occur based off of a defense mechanism for your body to maintain health and homeostasis, right? Like, that's literally the easiest way to think about it, is that when we're applying a stimulus to our body, okay, our body wants to stay homeostatic. The body just wants to stay in this point. And if we do something at very high speeds, it brings on a load here. So your body's going to adapt to protect itself from that heavy load. It's going to adapt and make a structure that can support that heavy load. If we do something with high speeds, it's going to do the same thing. The body was going to adapt and protect itself and make these necessary adaptations so that it can handle higher speeds, and thus in turn, it's going to be more stable when it puts out higher speeds itself. Okay, that's why these adaptations occur. So if we can literally think about adaptations as defense mechanisms, you start to see that, okay, if we want to be fast, we have to do fast things. If we want to be very strong and very stable, we have to do heavy things, okay? If we want to be an elite athlete, we're going to have to do all of this stuff. Okay? Now the other big factor here is that we can start to see, I think the underlying issue here is that as a strength coach is that we can start to really comprehend, like, all right, if we're in a sport that is more fast twitch dominant, then we should be avoiding certain things that could have a negative impact on like twitch force and on recruitment and on high force application. We don't need to worry about fatigue in the sense, and if we're a shot putter or if we're a power lifter, we don't need to worry about fatigue in the realm of the way that a 10K distance runner or a marathon would worry about fatigue, or a swimmer would worry about fatigue, or a tennis player might worry about fatigue. The fatigue aspect is totally different. There's still endurance in those explosive sports, but the endurance is going to be much more specific to very, very high loads or very, very high speeds. Okay. Now, if we start to think about, tennis or soccer or something like that, there's going to be still high, fast twitch muscle fibers that we have to train to make sure that we can execute actions at high speed, but we also have to have an endurance component. So the big thing here is that as a coach, we essentially know what the fastest athletes in the world do. Okay, we know how most sprinters train for the most part. Let's say 75 to 85%, 75 to 90%. We know how most of the best sprinters in the world train. We know the technique for most of the best sprinters. Okay, so we know that if we need to be faster, what we need to do for the most part. If we need to get really, really strong or really, really big, we know for the most part this is what we need to do. If we need to increase our endurance, we know for the most part this is what we need to do. Okay, and if we need to improve our impulse, which is essentially those fast twitch fibers, we know that we have to implement stimuli that will force adaptations to high load and high speeds through long ranges of motion and through short ranges of motion, all of them. Okay, so then the key then is to, as a strength coach, bring that back together and say, okay, is this sport force dominant, speed dominant? Is this sport impulse dominant? Is this sport endurance dominant? And then create your system off of that aspect. But this all comes back to understanding, what those fast twitch fibers are, what impacts fast twitch muscle fibers, and then how they handle things over a long period of time metabolically. Okay, so are there exercises that negatively impact fast twitch muscle? Yeah, an exercise that could negatively impact fast twitch muscle fiber might be, me going out for a 15-mile run. That's going to have a really negative impact on my vertical jump if I did that chronically over the span of 50 weeks, okay? I will have a negative impact on my vertical jump, but my blood volume will have a very positive impact, okay? My red blood cell mass will have a positive adaptation to that. So we have to look at those exercises that would have a negative impact. If I go swim for 2 hours a day, I'm doing repeat 500s, 3 sets of 500-meter sprints or 500-meter swims, like that's going to have a negative impact on my fast twitch fiber, but it's going to have a positive impact on my endurance. Okay. If I'm in a sport that's more endurance prone, that's good. If I'm in a sport that's more power prone, that's bad. So we have to understand all those things and then work towards that. What's up, guys? Our podcast and our channel are sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. The entire focus of Peak Strength is to provide you guys with the absolute best sports performance app that you could ever imagine. We build out the programs on the back end. We take in all of these different decisions that we learned here on site at Garage Strength, so that we can then apply it to you so you can improve your training. So if you guys want to improve your overall sports performance, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. You'll get a free week of training, and then you can start getting on those gains, get those reps done so that you can become a champion. Now, let's get back to the video. Peace. I wanted to share that I want to get into the muscle fiber type transitions, the regulation of oxygen consumption and fast and slow twitch muscle fibers. We're going to get into that. I want to go into real quickly some video reacts here. We'll look at Mike Israel talking about training for your muscle fibers, which
you might not.
Yeah, I actually want to watch this before.
What about failure proximity? Some people will say, with some validity, that faster twitch individuals or people who have faster twitch muscles, when they approach failure, it'll be normal speed, and then the muscles get really tired really fast. They're very poor at handling fatigue, which is true, and they go up and just back down. So there's not a place where you grind a lot and the shit slows down on you. At some point, it just falls on you. There's some validity to that, but there's also validity to the fact that a lot of the way people fail is down to a neurological causative explanation. It's the way your primary motor cortex works. It's the way your motor neurons are assembled, and at the particular margins, it's the way that your motor neurons interact with your muscles that may be the reason why you fail really fast instead of really slow. Yes, your fiber type is a component of that, but again, it may explain 20 to 40% of the variance, which means you have a 60 to 80% error rate in trying to infer fiber type just from how fast you approach failure. So there's some validity to it, but just generally fucking not enough for us to be like, yep, you're fast twitch, do sets of 5.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, I think when you're training really, really like high level athletes, I think it is easier to see that for the most part, but it's like when you're looking at high school kids, especially, like we're not training their muscle fiber type. I'm even thinking about, like, to a point, hamstrings are notorious for for being like faster twitch. But that if I would say like I haven't seen a positive response from like 5 sets of 12 leg curls or something like that, or like let's use this 5 sets of 9 Nordic hamstring curls versus like 5 sets of 5. Like honestly, I've seen really, really good response from the hamstring on those sets of 9, and some people would say that's too long of a duration of a set for those fast twitch muscles. So like I do agree with him to a point. I do think that there's some cases that I have had, and we've had some videos where we've put out like, if I see a kid, the way they jump or the way they react to a landing, how they recruit when they go through like an amortization phase, when they're like doing like a hurdle hop or something like that. I think that's where training the muscle fiber type, where you're like, okay, this kid's really, really slow twitch. We've got to be aware of certain things around this so that we can improve the way that they react. Let's get into this next one. This one's going to be a fiber shifting video here. No, this is going to be how to actually build fast twitch exercises. So there we go.
As that third type, which is going to be type 2X.
Does anybody know who's on my shirt there?
So what is a muscle fiber and how can it be identified? So right away, it's a myosin heavy chain isoform.
Jason, do we
typically
post
this
any
is
of
going
our
to be
podcasts
identified
on
through
Spotify?
biopsies, and you can do this through single fiber isolation or through massive stains. If you've ever watched Ricky Brook back in the day, the classic throws video, you can actually see him getting a biopsy in his shoulder to see what his twitch type was like in his shoulder. What it does is it really can predict where we're going to be good within specific sports. And this is all going to be based off that genetic foundation. We can then take those twitch types or those fiber types and say, all right, if we have someone who is more type 1, they're a little bit more Gumby-ish. They have a little bit more endurance. They can handle high volume of work because they can't put out a ton of intensity.
Running.
They're probably going to be marathon runners or 10K runners or maybe a steeplechaser, but typically very long
so this
distance.
is where I'm making the argument here is that one thing we can do is if we put kids through tests and we see what they're good at, like here's a good example. I'll try and share this. And don't forget, I'm about to release who is going to be on our podcast on Tuesday, and I'm going to want some questions from you guys, and I think you guys are going to be excited for this. But I think here's a good example is that if we take my son does youth track, okay, so you can see at a youth track and field meet, my son is in 6th grade and he's like 125 pounds, and if he would go out and he runs the 100 and he runs like the first 50 very, very well, he's like cooking everybody, and then the last 50 he sort of peters out and he usually gets like first or second, but he's usually gassed, right? He's a good thrower. He does his shot discus. He's got good technique, so that helps. And then he does the 4x1. He can jump too. He can do all those things. But if he went and he ran the 800 or the mile, he would gas hard. He would basically die. Now, there's other individuals. There's one girl in his age group range who just destroys everybody in the 800, destroys everybody in the 15 or in the 1600. She's probably a higher slow twitch individual to a point, like she's good at the 800, so she probably still has some fast twitch in there. So it's like as a coach, I actually see that and I start to think like this person should be more inclined to go towards like the 800, the 15, maybe the 5K. This athlete could be a really good pole vaulter based off their build. They're super, super wiry, super explosive. They run the 100 very fast. Maybe that's where they can go. Then you see a bigger kid who's really explosive. He could go to the throws, and you can start to see where these individuals could be more successful. And then you sort of lump them into these other events. You have like 3 events now instead of, you go to a track meet and they would have access to, let's just say 20 events, right? Now all of a sudden they have access to basically 4. So it dials in what sport or what event they should be competing in. And it's like Owen just popped in. If I saw Owen just popped into the chat, Owen's an ice hockey player. Okay. If Owen was 150 pounds soaking wet and he's 5'10", and he could run at like an 8 like if he could run like a 7-minute mile for like 3 hours straight, he shouldn't play ice hockey. He's not going to be built to play ice hockey. He should go into running 10Ks. Like he should be a 10K runner, and we should get him on the track. But if Owen, if you get somebody who's 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", they're really explosive. He's got a 30-inch vertical almost. He's not even that strong, but he's got a 30-inch vertical. It's like, get him on the ice. Get him on where he's going to be in a much more explosive movement pattern that does also have technique. And I think it's important to break down sports in that regard. Let's see here. This is going to be
your fast twitch muscle fibers, and we're going to start, right?
Okay, so
Here, or 6 doubles if you want, but it's got to be all about on-rate coding.
oh man, I hate when this happens. I want to go right into this because I think some of the stuff I want to talk to you guys about with the. So let's get into this. Okay, fiber shifting, muscle fiber type transitions with exercise. I think this is going to be an important one for everybody. I think it's a pretty simple thing to understand to a point is like, can you essentially go from like fast twitch to slow twitch or back and forth? And is that feasible? Okay, so human muscle fibers, they're going to be classified by myosin heavy chain isoforms characterized by slow to fast contractile speeds. Okay, type 1, they're going to be slow twitch. High abundance in elite endurance athletes such as long distance runners and cyclists. And I think this is an interesting part is that you could see in like, let's say you get the champion of the Tour de France and you look at like their vastus lateralis, their one part of their quad, it's going to be like 85% slow twitch. Okay. But then you get like a sprint cyclist and the exact same muscle, and that exact same muscle in a sprint cyclist might be like 75 to 80% fast twitch. You look at a weightlifter, it's going to be fast twitch. If you look at a running back, it's going to be fast twitch. So it's interesting because the exact same muscle. And if you have somebody who does endurance stuff and then switches over time, you can see that change. Anyway, this is where this is going. Alternatively, fast twitch 2A and 2X. So 2A, from my understanding, if you would take a slow twitch fiber, okay, and if you would take a 2A and a 2X, okay, just the cell, okay, just that one fiber, and they're the exact same size. The fast twitch 2A would put out about 5 to 6 times the force as the slow twitch type 1, okay? The type 2X would put out about like 15 to 20 times the force of what the type 1 would put out. But again, they're extremely fatigued. Type 2X is going to be extremely, extremely fatigable, okay? So these fibers are abundant in elite power athletes such as weightlifters and sprinters. While cross-sectional comparisons have shown marked differences between athletes, longitudinal data has not been clearly converged on patterns in fiber type shifts over time, particularly between slow and fast fibers. So this is interesting. Weightlifters, sprinters, and again, this is what we had mentioned earlier. Cross-sectional comparisons. The cross-sectional area matters a lot to the ability to put out a large amount of force. Okay. So, however, not all fiber type identification techniques are created equal and thus may limit interpretation. Basically, when you're looking at fibers inside the body, outside the body, how they stain them, they're not all the exact same technique, and it can have an impact on research. So hybrid fibers which express more than one MHC type. So you have these fibers that might be fast twitch and slow twitch, and they do a good job. That's probably what we'll see more prominently in a CrossFitter or in a wrestler, combat athlete, I would suppose, may make up a significant proportion of fibers because they're more dynamic. Okay, so the measurement of the distribution of fibers would necessitate the ability to identify hybrid fibers, which is best done through single fiber analysis. So current evidence using the most appropriate techniques suggests a clear ability of fibers to shift between hybrid and pure fibers, as well as between slow and fast fibers. The context to which this occurs is discussed in this specific paper, but there is evidence that fibers will go from a type 1 to a type 2 hybrid, or a type 2 to a type 1 hybrid, and you can see the shifting happening depending upon what they're doing, what activity they're doing, and how they're even going about that. And I wanted to even just point out, like, if I would come on PubMed here and just type in cross-sectional here, okay, this is going to give me, let's go cross-sectional muscular strength, okay? Watch how quickly you'll see the importance of muscular strength, failure, cross-sectional area muscular strength. I think this is like one of the original. Oh, no, this is one from '08. Okay, so even if I click on this paper right here, I can come down here. All muscle force per cross-sectional area is inversely related with pennation angle. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Maybe we should break this down in a future paper. This one's freaking cool on the speed skaters and how they extend their muscle on their knee. Anyway, not to get too lost in that, because we're focusing on this here now, the regulation of oxygen consumption in fast and slow twitch. Okay, so phosphorus, nuclear magnetic resonance spectra, and steady state O2 consumption rates were obtained from ex vivo arterially perfused cat biceps brachii. Cats, ungodly fast twitch. And if I remember, I want to say if a human muscle has one myosin head to every 6 actin heads, I want to say cats might have 1 to 12, something along those lines. It's like a much higher rate, which makes them super twitchy in the sense of fast twitch. Okay, cat biceps brachii and soleus muscles during and after periods of isometric twitch stimulation at 30 degrees Celsius. Steady state O2 consumption increased and phosphocreatine concentration decreased progressively with stimulation. Okay, so steady state O2 increased, phosphocreatine concentration decreased because they were using that more as energy. Phosphocreatine recovery after these stimulation periods followed first order kinetics with a half time of 10 minutes. The results in the biceps could be explained by a feedback control of cellular respiration by ADP concentration. In the soleus, steady state O2 consumption also increased and phosphocreatine concentration decreased as stimulation rates increased. The half time was approximately 5 minutes, but in contrast to the pattern in the biceps, the kinetics was not first order, so slower twitch responded in a different order than the first order. There was an overshoot during the recovery period in the phosphocreatine content of the soleus and a corresponding undershoot. The respiration rate in neither muscle was dependent on the PI content. Thus, we conclude that the mechanism of control of cellular respiration is both quantitatively and qualitatively different in fast and slow twitch muscle fibers. So this just goes back to sort of like it's related to the metabolic aspect. It's related to how the fast twitch and the slow twitch use energy, and it comes back to if you don't understand how they use energy, what their the metabolic usage is, then you could in turn have poor training that could have a negative impact on how your athletes develop over time. Okay, now we're back. Tuesday. We're talking about Tuesday. Best fast twitch for sprinters. Ooh, that's a great video. Ethan Kimball. Best fast twitch exercises for sprinters. Owen asks, what's the benefit of accessory hypertrophy exercises for athletes that need to be predominantly fast twitch like hockey players, running backs? So this is where we go into what we were discussing earlier. Who has the most fast twitch muscle fibers? Holy crap. I just need to address this. Andrew, zone 2 training has a negative impact on fast twitch fibers. But here's the issue, is that I think there needs to be a point in your life where strength, this is the ultimate dichotomy of or problems around lifespan, is that strength, fast twitch fibers, and VO2 max are the best indicators of lifespan, more so than like heart rate, cholesterol, C-reactive protein, all of these things. Strength, fast twitch fibers, VO2 max. Now the problem is you think about it and you go, fast twitch fibers and VO2 max sort of like are this inverse relationship, right? They sort of go against each other to a point. So I think it's making sure that you have some way to deal with that. So to go back to Andrew's question that has me dying is who has the most fast twitch muscle fiber, Pongo, Ognop, or Buttercup? Those are my 3 cats. Buttercup's fat and lazy. She was the first cat that we found, and she grew up being comfortable and not having to struggle for food. Same with Pongo. So they're all outdoor cats. We have all of our cats outdoor. Ognop is our feral cat that we tamed, and he's an absolute lunatic, but I've seen him do the most athletic feats that you could ever imagine. Ethan's asking best fast twitch for sprinters. That's a video that we should be putting out. So, yeah, I think with Owen's question, it comes back to stability of the individual, also recognizing that hypertrophy is a key component to increasing force. So if we can increase the size of a muscle, the muscle will then in turn make more force, or it can produce more force if it's bigger, but we have to do the right. So it's almost like the supplemental exercise, like a hypertrophy based exercise for the hamstrings, it's a long play. It's trying to add mass to an area that's a problem that you also hope in the future you can use to then develop it to fire more effectively and to produce more power. Ognop's definitely freak of the week. Okay, so on Tuesday, we are going to be going live. Okay, we are actually going to be going live with Joel Seedman. Mr. Joel Seedman is coming on the podcast. He's coming on Garage Strengths podcast. So we want to put together a whole bunch of questions. I have a handful of questions here, and some of my big stuff that I wanted to talk to him about are essentially around, I wanted to play, I want to go over why people don't like him, what they're jealous of. I think there's a couple big things. I think his exercises can be ridiculous, but I think some of them are actually fun to look at. I think he's had an impact on like fitness influencers. I think he has had a negative impact on the development of younger kids because they do some of these ridiculous exercises instead of like just using nice solid training. But I wanted to look at what's his traditional system that he used in the beginning that he saw was not effective, and that led to him creating this wild system on the side. How does he intake athletes? How does he assess these athletes? Does he use benchmark movement patterns that he revisits to then help him understand if an athlete's making progress or not? Those are some questions I have. When an athlete comes in, do you spend time re-educating their patterns based off of what you teach with your stuff? One question I do have that I think is interesting is someone like myself in the past, I've done his movements, and I've done them with a very large amount of force, real heavy weights. And I've done them by all accounts, pretty good technique according to his standards. If traditional resistance-based training is not effective, how do we make up for something like that? That was a question I had. What's the creative process of his exercise selection? Does he run training blocks in 2 to 3 to 4 week, 8 weeks, whatever, or not at all? How does he actually gauge improvements in these movements? And then do you see sports having different patterns like baseball versus football versus, anything else? So, does he zap athletes with a cattle prod? So I do have these questions for Joel Seedman. I wanted to see what you guys thought about that. I want to see Trip. I think what temp time protocol is the most useful for recovery for repeated use in a single week for sauna. Trip Morris is asking. This is Hampton Morris's dad's asking about repeated. I would do this 20 to 30 minutes in the morning or afternoon, and I would typically do it post workout. I would go 170 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 to 30 minutes. I think that is the absolute most consistently researched. I think that's also the best for recovery. I think it's the best to stimulate heat shock proteins. It's enough time, and it should not have a degradation on performance. Hope that helps you, Trip. So I wanted to see what you guys think about that. Pass the plate. Prince Vegeta. Yeah, pass the plate's a great core exercise. So Joel Seedman is going to be on the podcast. Do you guys have any questions for him? Do you have anything that you'd like to see us discuss with him? It's interesting, too, because when I see him do some of his strength work, I I actually saw him squatting almost with his toes in. And it was something like that is almost, for me, painful. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about that. I'm going to answer some of these questions because a couple of you are asking, how would you train a road cyclist that is a sprinter? Okay, so let's say an endurance cyclist that they use sprints quite well, quite effectively. And then how would you use ballistic movements for athletes that might be endurance based? So I think it's pretty similar. And I think for me, the big question or the big answer there would be, how frequently can they get in the weight room? And if we have like a traditional endurance athlete, they might only get in the weight room twice a week for 40 minutes. So about 20 minutes of that I would spend using, some plyometric work or some weightlifting derivative exercise to try and improve their performance. Owen just said somebody looks nuts. Coach, off topic. Sorry. How do you see the next 16 weeks playing out? I think the biggest thing for me, Owen, is literally getting your back squat to like 315 for 3 to 5 reps. Literally, that's all I'm like thinking about right now. Is like, you back squat 315 for reps, you're going to be cleaning like 275 plus. And I think that you're going to be in a whole different ball game then. Andrew's saying, I'd like to show Joel Seaman any weightlifting competition and show all the angles that break the 90-degree rule. What event would Joel pick for the dad athlon between Dane and Earl? So this is another thing I wanted to bring up to Joel was like, yeah, maybe I don't need to. I've seen him just do things that I'm like, I don't really think. I don't think it's overly effective. Okay, somebody else just asked, Dane, what's the most typical clean variation you would use for beginner football players in the comprehension phase? I think a younger football player who's just learning how to do a clean or do a snatch, I would literally just have them do a clean or a snatch. Okay, sometimes if I see someone really arm bending quite a bit, I would back off a little bit from a full clean and I might have them do more hangs. Because I think the hangs can actually get rid of that arm bending. How do I get like Werner Gunther? Okay, so this is a good example. If you would get, does a greater difference between your 5 and 1 rep max indicate faster twitch muscle? I would say yes, but it could also be a representation of you're spending more time in those 5 reps, that 5 rep scheme as well. Atiksh, I know you played badminton when you were younger. I didn't just play badminton, dude. We would play badminton legitimately. I'm not even lying, like 6 to 8 hours a day, like every single day. We would lift in the morning and we would lift for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, 4 to 5 days a week. We would do a lot of lifts, a lot of like snatches, back squats, front squats, a lot of benches, a lot of pull-ups, right? A lot of like your traditional stuff. And then what would end up happening is we would do an absolute ton of badminton work. And I think that that's like one of those things that people sort of don't take, or they don't realize how easy it is it's like, dude, you can lift a lot and you can do just an absolute ungodly amount of lifting and still be super, super explosive. So I'm going to show you this. This is Werner Gunther right here. How can we get like Werner Gunther? I think this comes back to understanding what's the adaptation that we're looking for from the body. And what I'm going to do here, because somebody just asked if we could build out a... Hugo actually just asked a question that maybe that's another thing I should address. Somebody just said, Dane, are you going to the Olympics? How can we just had, Dane, are you going to the Olympics? Can you build out 1 week of training? And can we react to Werner Gunther? So how would you train? Maybe we'll do a week of training for a slow twitch X endurance athlete to try and get them explosive. That'll be a good week of training. Okay, so here we go. Look at what we have Werner doing here. He's probably one of the most explosive athletes of all time. Now, the problem here is that someone would look at this and say, oh, he's just doing plyometrics, or he's just doing cleans, or Werner Gunther was already explosive. If cleans didn't make him explosive, or jumps didn't make him explosive, it just happened to be he was explosive, so he did a lot of jumps. It's like, there's a gray area, but there's also a lot to show that being 6'6" and moving like this, you have to learn, you have to train your muscles, and by creating a more consistent myosin mining pattern, makes you more athletic, makes your muscle more athletic.
Ultime exercice de souplesse, de relâchement au rythme du coureur de haie.
Not bad hurdling technique there. This is one of my favorites. And after this, we'll build up a week. We'll build out a week program. Okay. Here we go. So while we're watching this, kill the volume on the video. Sorry. Let's get back to this. While we're going through this, somebody had asked me, Dane, are you going to the Olympics? He's so smooth over the hurdles. He absolutely is. Yes, I'm actually going to the Olympics. And not only am I going to the Olympics, I have been named the head coach for Athletics Samoa, the head coach for Athletics Samoa, and the team manager for athletics. So I think that's pretty cool. I don't know what you guys think. I hope you guys think that's cool. Okay, so let's get into... So I will be at the Olympics. Reps and sets. I don't know about a week. Let's do a workout. Let's do we'll call this the Save the Gumby workout, okay? So initially, if I have an athlete who, let's go back and say, who's super Gumby-ish, okay? I'm going to add insert right there. Okay, so to Joel Seedman's credit, I do think there's a decent amount of evidence of unstable training that can lead to lighting up that nervous system. So let's say PVC walks, 5 by 15 meters. And if you guys are inside peak strength, you're probably familiar with those PVC walks. Now let's say, let's go over here. And then let's say this is a Gumby athlete. This is my current favorite go-to, 5 by 15 meters. Let's say 5 by 10 jumps, like easy jumps. Now, 1A, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a power clean, full clean, split, okay? So we want to challenge them. Now we're going to do a lot of volume. We're going to do 1 power clean, 2 full cleans, okay? 1 power, 2 full cleans, okay? So this is an athlete who's a former endurance athlete. They should be able to handle quite a bit of volume. Now let's go back squat, double bounce, because they tend to, people who are formerly athletes that they struggle to be twitchier. If you do a double bounce, that helps quite a bit. Okay. Owen just asked, should I be hitting any impulse in the exposure phase? I think my concern is that you got so ruined by the last program that makes me like, let's see how this goes first, because you got so fatigued. Let me know if that makes sense. Okay, here. Okay, here. Then we go fast stop lunges, and then we can go. Let's just do this here, okay? So then we go into back squat, double bounce. Let's go 5 by 2, and then let's go 1 by 5, unbroken, no double bounce. Okay, and then we do 6 by 3. So seated, jump up. You got to use those hamstrings to extend rapidly. Fast stop lunges. This is going to be like you take a step and boom, throw on the brakes. Okay, Take a step, boom, throw on the brakes. Let's do 4 sets of 5 each leg and hold like 20-pound dumbbells, 4 sets of 7. This would be a real easy workout. Save the Gumby. Okay, this is the Save the Gumby workout. And look, this is a great, and this is what's interesting is I would still use this program for most football players. This is a base program. This is something we would do in the fall with the throwers. This is something I would do in the fall or out of season with football guys. I would do this. Some of the wrestlers, depending upon, like right now, South Dakota State, we implemented a new training program, new training block. Some of them that have lower vertical jumps, they're going to do something similar to this. So that's how we set this stuff up. And this is a really, really good freaking program. So it's something that everybody can use and really get as strong as freaking possible. But I think it goes back to so I think that when we're looking at the adaptations that we need, each time we write a program, we've got to think through, like, what's the adaptation that we need? And in this case, I want this athlete to get strong in the clean, more stable in the back squat. Okay, so this is the goal. That's the goal that we're trying to really build towards. So every time I write that program, that's what I'm thinking through that lens. Okay, so let me know if that's clear, if that helps you guys thinking through programming. Now I'm going to get into some more questions, and then I'm going to head out to go back and coach. Speeding up recovery, sleeping more. Number 1, sleep more. Big one. Eat more protein, second biggest one. A meal that would not be an athlete day, that would be more of like a leg-based day. Mr. Oliva. App is afraid to give me PB. Andrew, I don't know. Andrew, you're not over 40. Let me see. Coach, what can we do to increase our force production in sprinting other than plyometrics and increasing 1 rep maxes in our lifts? That's a good question, because I think that to increase impulse, okay, so let's say if we're sprinting, we have to have, every time that we ground, okay, boom, 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 we have to have a large amount of impulse. So we have to have high force, short time. Okay, so in the beginning of our sprint, okay. Also, Jason, I feel like we should come up. This is when we should do a vote for what should we call myself? Should I be Olympic strength coach Dane Miller, Olympic performance coach Dane Miller, Olympic coach Dane Miller? We should do a poll for that. I think that when you're looking at sprinting and producing more force, you've got to think it always comes back to force over time. And so if we're looking at someone sprinting 0 to 15 yards or 0 to 20 yards, they're going to have more time for each step. But as they get closer to 15 to 20 yards, okay, that step gets slower, or the step gets faster, meaning they have less time. Okay, they have less time to apply force. So increasing a back squat or increasing a clean is going to apply to like the first 7 to 8 strides. Okay. After that, we got to look at touch point, and that's where, when we're doing something like hurdle hops or single leg bounds or stair jumps, and this is a big one, someone who gets on and does stair jumps and they're going boom, boom, and notice how it's like boom, like this. It's but if they're doing a stair jump and they're going boom, 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 there's quicker contact time, okay, and they're landing and going, land go, land go, land go. That's where you have to increase impulse, is by teaching your body to hit go, hit go, hit go, hit go, and accelerate through those jumps up a step, or do those mini hurdle hops fast, 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 right? So that's where we've got to get rolling with all that stuff. So I almost want to think, I want to leave this poll up there. I'm going to head out because I've got to get to weightlifting for the day. Ryan's got his Youth World Championships coming up, so I'm going to head out. Jason, I'm going to leave that poll up, and I'm probably going to have you come in, and if you want to end this, you can end this. But thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you guys like those programs as well. Vote vote on that survey today. And then Tuesday, we're going to be going live with the Savannah of Samoa, Dane Miller. We're going to be going live with Joel Seedman. So send us those questions on the community post. Peace. Got to define what is stupid strong. And I think outside of seeing someone in the gym and they're just repping out 315 for dozens of reps, right? That's going to be stupid strong. I also think when you see a dude walking down the street and you've just got that eye test, you're like, that dude has no neck.